So Jay is going to show us what we've learned from the Citizens' Assembly. And it was a great honour that I spoke at the Citizens' Assembly about climate justice for the Worthing and Ada Council. And there's been other Citizens' Assemblies going on. And so Jay, over to you.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to this SECA networking meeting. And I've been a member of the SECA steering group since the beginning, as I'm part of Kind of Living, which runs a sustainability home show in the Horsham area every year, we hope, except during COVID, amongst many other things. What's my locus for doing this slot? Well, my professional career has been as a director in local government. And also in May, having retired, I was elected to West Sussex County Council. And in that context, I'd like to start with Martin Sheen's words. Future generations are not going to ask us what political party were you in when you knew the glaciers were melting. So just to reflect on that, that's why I always have strongly supported SECA's non-partisan approach to this. But the thing is, democratic governments can only do, in most circumstances, what they have the consent of the people to do. And people will accept all sorts of things and all sorts of changes in times of crisis. So if you think back, conscription in times of war, rationing, blackouts, and even lockdowns and compulsory health testing in the circumstances we're in now. And what do we mean by crisis in that context? Well, I think what we mean is people are visibly dying. People are hearing about their friends, their relatives, their neighbours, and they know that there is a threat to life. And our problem is that in climate terms, by the time people are visibly dying, it's too late. In most cases, I appreciate there are others in low-lying islands in the Pacific who would argue with that, but from our perspective, that's actually the situation. And those carbons take 200 years to disperse. So just adding to what Tony said, that's part of our problem about consent. So where are we now in terms of popular support for climate action? So I want to start first of all with worldwide. We can look at the UN Development Programme's People's Climate Vote during 2020. This covered 50 countries and involved, sampling of about half the world's population. So it's a huge indicator of how the world is thinking about this. And there's good news, which is 64% think that climate change is a global emergency. And there are majorities in some of the highest emitting countries for more renewable energy, changed land use and forest conservation, more use of electric vehicles or bicycles. And there's a high correlation of this support with those who have college or university levels of education. And funnily enough, high correlation between the younger members of the population, and by that I mean the 18 to 59s, who are more concerned than the 60 pluses. So it's well worth a read. Obviously, it's a pretty detailed document. It's on the UN Development Programme's website, and I'm sure we can make that link available. But what about here in the UK? Well, as you will know, the UK has led in terms of Parliament declaring a climate emergency, and 6 select committees of the UK Parliament set up the Climate Assembly UK. And this was to review how the UK can achieve its legally binding target of 0 emissions by 2050. Yes, I know. We'll see whether that stays after COP26, but that was where they were at the time. And they had a carefully balanced selection of 108 people. They had 6 weekends of input from the right experts during 2020. If you go on the website, some of those inputs are really powerful, and they give you a whole load of background information that I found really helpful. And they deliberated. So, what can we do about this? I'm going to give you some shorthand, a shorthand review, let's call it, because it's obviously relatively short time we have now of what they recommended. So what they said about land travel, that these are our peers, a representation of our population. They wanted a ban on sale of new petrol, diesel and hybrids vehicles by 2030, with grants to help low carbon cars and a scrappage scheme and reduction in car use. They were looking for bringing public transport under government control. Interesting in the light of the recent issues around the train franchises, to allow for sustainable investment in new clean vehicles, new routes, greater frequency and lower fares. And they also wanted better planning of local communities. An interesting point this, to facilitate reduced travel, essentially by making sure that there were local facilities so you didn't have to go elsewhere, and that scooter and cycle use was encouraged. What did they say about air travel? Interesting, this was the one that they seemed to find most difficult to look at more radical solutions. They were worried about the impact on people's lifestyles, but they recommended tax increases for the more frequent and long mileage flyers. They looked at reducing the growth in passenger numbers. They didn't want the previous projections pre-COVID. They definitely wanted the polluters to pay, the airline industry to invest in greenhouse gas removal and the development of new sustainable flight technologies. And they it still leaves 30 million tonnes of CO2 still to be removed or prevented. In the home, they wanted a more long-term government strategy, which was around much better information, health and support. They looked at greater competition in the sustainable energy production. They looked at product standard changes towards low carbon products, and they wanted gas boilers banned from sale by 2030. On food production and land use, they were very keen on natural outcomes, information and training for land users, regulations about low carbon and subsidies for carbon storage and absorption, and also using government procurement of low carbon food and low carbon products. And they were looking at a reduction in meat and dairy consumption by 20 to 40%. There's much, much more in this report, and I don't have time to really go through the whole of the rest of it. But the key thing is that many of these recommendations are about what people will accept. I suggest to you that you go and have a look at it, you go and have a read of it. And I want to finish by saying, I think COP26, with the curves that Tony has shown us, is going to help move public opinion on in terms of what we need to do to radicalize the work we have to do. And I'm going to finish with a quote: start by doing what's necessary, then do what's possible, and suddenly you are doing the impossible. That was St. Francis of Assisi. I'm sorry, I couldn't get through the whole of that in the time available. Please go and have a look at the report yourselves. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jay. And maybe you could put the link to that in the chat as well.